What if a murder was stopped at the last second? This isn't a hypothetical query, but a chilling contemplation, a moment when life hangs by the thinnest thread, poised on the precipice of irreversible tragedy. The air itself seems to crackle with an unseen tension, a silence that is suddenly, violently shattered by the piercing, undulating wail of sirens. The sound rapidly intensifies, growing from a distant murmur to an overwhelming, insistent shriek that dominates the soundscape. Simultaneously, the visual field is assaulted by the relentless, strobing pulse of red and blue lights, painting the landscape in urgent, shifting patterns as multiple police vehicles converge with astonishing speed. They arrive with tires squealing, engines roaring, throwing up dust and gravel as they skid to precise halts. From within these cruisers, a flurry of activity erupts. Police officers, their faces set in grim determination, pour out onto the street. Their movements are swift, purposeful, almost choreographed in their efficiency as they sprint with unwavering resolve toward an unseen, yet clearly urgent, focal point. This immediate sensory immersion is designed to instantaneously pull the listener into the heart of a high-stakes scenario, one where every breath, every heartbeat, and indeed, every passing second carries an immense life-or-death weight. The atmosphere is not merely tense. It is charged with the unspoken promise of imminent danger, a desperate, breathless race against a clock that ticks ever faster toward an unknown, potentially devastating outcome. This unfolding drama is far from a theoretical exercise. It represents a real-life scenario where the swift, coordinated intervention of law enforcement occurred with breathtaking precision, just as a catastrophic act was on the very brink of unfolding. Our narrative will delve into the granular details leading up to this exact, pivotal moment, meticulously highlighting the inherent urgency and the incredibly narrow window of opportunity that define this remarkable escape from tragedy. The precise setting for this critical incident is a quiet, seemingly idyllic suburban home, nestled inconspicuously on Maple Drive. This street, renowned for its mature, tree-lined sidewalks, meticulously manicured gardens, and a pervasive, almost palpable sense of community tranquility, typically offered a haven of peace. The central figure around whom this entire narrative revolves is Alara Vance, a woman whose life, until quite recently, had been a portrait of serene predictability and quiet, purposeful dedication. As a highly dedicated elementary school teacher at Northwood Elementary, Alara's days were meticulously structured around the vibrant energy of her young students, the methodical preparation of engaging lesson plans, and a comforting rhythmic flow of the academic calendar. Her home life mirrored this established order, typically serving as a sanctuary of peace and quiet, often spent immersed in the task of grading papers, indulging the quiet pleasure of a good book, or engaging in reflective moments that allowed her to recharge. Her personal relationships were stable and nurturing, characterized by close bonds with trusted friends and a particularly strong, comforting connection with her sister, Clara, who resided in a nearby town, making their regular visits a cherished part of Alara's routine. Her entire existence, woven from threads of consistency and an absence of drama, seemed utterly impervious to any hint of peril, malevolence, or the unsettling shadows that lurk within the darker corners of human intent. However, beneath this tranquil veneer of ordinary, predictable life, a subtle, yet increasingly pervasive and profoundly unsettling disruption began to take hold, slowly but inexorably eroding Alara's deep-seated sense of security. The initial signs were almost imperceptible, easily dismissed by even her rational mind as mere coincidences, products of an overactive imagination, or simply the harmless, everyday quirks of suburban living. She might find herself inexplicably glancing nervously over her shoulder during her customary evening walks through the neighborhood, a strange, prickling sensation of being watched settling upon her skin, despite seeing no one overtly present. A dark-colored sedan, a model she couldn't quite place or identify definitively, seemed to appear with an unusual and increasingly unsettling frequency on her quiet street, its engine often idling for moments that stretched unnaturally long before it would finally pull away. At night, the once comforting and familiar hum of her quiet home started to feel distinctly different. An uninvited, heavy stillness seemed to permeate the very air, or faint, unidentifiable sounds would occasionally drift from just outside her windows, lingering at the periphery of her hearing. Impossible to pinpoint. These fleeting observations, individually minor and seemingly insignificant on their own, began to accumulate, forming a disquieting, almost insidious pattern. The once deeply comforting familiarity of her home, her personal haven of peace and privacy, began to feel irrevocably imbued with an ominous, chilling undertone, casting an ever-lengthening shadow over her daily routine. The profound sense of being completely alone in her quiet residence, a solitude she had once cherished for a profound peace and opportunity for introspection, now began to evoke a burgeoning and deeply unsettling sense of suspense. It was a feeling that suggested a latent, unseen danger that was slowly, methodically, and almost imperceptibly drawing closer. The arrival of evening darkness, once a cherished source of peace and quiet reflection after a long day, now hinted at a malevolent presence lurking just within its depths, transforming the familiar into something profoundly and deeply unsettling. This gradual, almost imperceptible erosion of her fundamental sense of safety marked a sinister transition from a predictable, ordinary normal to a life suddenly and profoundly disrupted by an emerging, unseen threat. The very atmosphere around her seemed to become denser, charged with an unspoken tension. Her every quiet moment now potentially a prelude to something terrible, solidifying the grim reality that an ominous shadow had fallen over her once serene existence. As Alara's initial, vague sense of unease intensified, the subtle disruptions in her life began to solidify into increasingly distinct and undeniable signs of danger. What had initially been dismissed as fleeting shadows or suspicious vehicles now evolved into more overt, persistent, and deeply unsettling occurrences, pushing her beyond the point of mere apprehension. The phone calls, which had started as brief, silent hang-ups, escalated in frequency and shifted in their nature. They often occurred late at night, sometimes several times within an hour, their silence on the other end no longer merely unnerving, but carrying a profound, chilling implication of a hidden presence, an undeniable, active awareness of her existence and her routine. This silent surveillance through the phone line was far more terrifying than any verbal threat could have been, leaving her to grapple with the unknown intentions of the caller. Then came the very specific, tangible incidents that shattered any lingering doubts Alara might have harbored about her own perception. One morning, as she stepped out to retrieve her newspaper, she discovered a single discarded cigarette but lying precisely on the edge of her porch steps. It was a brand she didn't recognize, and she knew definitively that neither she nor any of her neighbors smoked. Its presence felt like a deliberate message, a subtle but undeniable violation of her private space. Days later, a small, almost imperceptible scuff mark appeared conspicuously on the side gate leading to her backyard, as if someone had attempted to climb over it, leaving behind a faint but undeniable trace of their illicit presence. A few nights after that, she awoke to a distinct scratching sound coming from the side of her house, near the kitchen window. It was faint but persistent, sounding like something hard being dragged or scraped across the exterior wall. These were no longer just ambiguous feelings or coincidences. They were concrete, physical pieces of evidence, undeniable proof of an active intrusion, a sustained and escalating violation of her personal sanctuary. The sheer accumulation of these incidents tightened its grip, transforming Alara's previous anxiety into a pervasive, almost suffocating dread that began profoundly impact every facet of her daily life. The simple, once automatic act of locking her doors at night became an obsessive, repetitive ritual. She found herself checking and rechecking every lock, every window latch, not just once, but multiple times before she could even attempt to find sleep, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Her movement around her own home became hesitant, cautious. Her eyes constantly scanned windows, checked blinds, and darted towards every potential point of entry, as if expecting to see a face press against the glass at any moment. The very act of looking out into her once peaceful backyard at night, a habit she used to enjoy, now became an exercise in palpable dread, the familiar shadows transforming into potential hiding places. She began to discuss these rapidly growing concerns with her sister, Clara, during their regular phone calls, her voice now consistently strained and tinged with raw fear that Clara had never heard before. Initially, Clara, attempting to offer comfort and reassurance, tried to attribute Alara's worries to pressures of her demanding teaching job or general stress. But as Alara's accounts grew relentlessly more specific, more frequent, and more terrifyingly tangible, and as her voice became thinner, almost hoarse with suppressed panic, Clara's own concern deepened into genuine alarm. Alara would meticulously describe the chilling precision with which the unseen observer seemed to know her established routine. How the strange, dark car would appear just as she pulled out of her driveway for work, or precisely when she returned home in the late afternoon. She started taking circuitous, different routes to familiar places like the grocery store, making unnecessary turns, parking further away from entrances just to allow herself a few extra moments to scan the area for any sign of the ominous sedan before daring to exit her vehicle. The once vibrant and comforting sanctuary of her home, filled with memories and personal artifacts, now felt less like a haven and more like a carefully monitored stage upon which an unknown threat was playing a silent, terrifying role. Its pervasive presence was felt in every shadowed corner, in every unexpected creak of the floorboards, and every subtle sound that drifted from outside her walls. This protracted period of heightened vigilance and sustained psychological pressure was a constant, debilitating drain, systematically chipping away at her fundamental sense of security and replacing it with gnawing, persistent fear that was slowly consuming her peace of mind and her ability to function normally. Every unexplained noise, every distant car alarm, every flickering outdoor light served only to amplify this burgeoning tension, reinforcing the chilling reality that malevolent presence was now focused directly and exclusively on her, closing in with an unseen, yet palpably determined, relentless pace. The very air around her seemed to thicken, charged with the unspoken threat of an impending, unavoidable confrontation, making every passing day a delicate and precarious balance between maintaining an outward facade of normalcy and succumbing to the overwhelming internal dread. This continuous and escalating sequence of events solidified the understanding that a critical juncture was rapidly approaching, demanding immediate and decisive action from external forces, as her own increasingly desperate attempts to secure safety proved tragically insufficient against an unseen, persistent, and malevolent threat. The profound gravity of the situation was no longer a matter of mere apprehension, but a stark, undeniable reality, requiring urgent, outside intervention to prevent a potential catastrophe from unfolding right before her eyes. The insidious campaign of psychological pressure and overt intrusion that had been slowly consuming Alara Vance's life escalated dramatically, pushing her beyond the point of simply feeling uneasy and into the chilling certainty of being actively targeted. The vague, unsettling signs that once plagued her now solidified into undeniable acts, making the chilling reality of her situation impossible to ignore or attribute to stress. What began as fleeting glances and subtle sounds transformed into deliberate, tangible violations of her personal space and peace. One particularly unnerving evening, upon returning to her seemingly safe haven after a late errand, Alara discovered a small, yet distinct, mark etched into the paintwork near her front door. It was a symbol she didn't recognize, crude and almost hidden, but its presence resonated with a deep, primal fear, signaling that her home was no longer inviolable. Later that same week, an unmarked, dark-colored van began to appear with unnerving regularity on her quiet street. Often parked a few houses down from her own residence, its occupants obscured by heavily tinted windows. Its persistent presence felt less like a random coincidence and more like a deliberate, unsettling act of surveillance, a constant, watchful eye on her movements. Then, the cryptic phone calls, what had previously been silent and unnerving in their quietness, began to feature faint, distorted sounds on the other end, almost like muffled breathing, distant whispers, or the barely discernible rustle of fabric. These subtle auditory details intensified the chilling sense of a lurking, active presence, making the silence on the line even more terrifying than direct threats. This tangible and undeniable shift from vague apprehension to concrete, escalating evidence of malicious threat forced Alara to confront the terrifying reality that she was not just being watched, but actively pursued, her fundamental sense of personal safety and privacy irrevocably compromised in ways she had never before conceived. Every new incident served to peel back another layer of her former security, leaving her increasingly exposed to an encroaching darkness. The mounting urgency of her dire circumstances compelled Alara to take a decisive, crucial step. She finally contacted the police. The phone call itself, later reconstructed from detailed transcripts, revealed a voice strained not only with profound fear, but also with rapidly burgeoning desperation, a desperate plea for help that transcended mere apprehension. She meticulously recounted the entire chronological sequence of escalating incidents, detailing with precision the increasingly frequent and strange phone calls, the persistent presence of suspicious vehicles, the overwhelming feeling of being watched, and the specific, unsettling marks left on her property. The dispatcher on the other end, a seasoned professional trained to detect genuine distress beneath the words, recognized a mounting urgency and profound fear resonating in Alara's trembling voice. As Alara spoke, the background sound design subtly intensifies, mirroring the rising tension she felt, a low, almost subliminal hum that gradually swelled, reflecting the growing danger that permeated her life. The visuals accompanying this harrowing recounting cut rapidly, almost frenetically, between chilling images of the unknown threat and Alara's increasingly isolated, tense demeanor within the confines of her own home. We see brief, unnerving glimpses of a gloved hand reaching for a door handle in the dead of night, a shadowy figure moving with unnatural speed past a dimly lit window, with a faint gleam of something metallic in the darkness, all intercut with stark close-ups of Alara. In these close-ups, she is shown obsessively checking her locks, peering with fearful intensity through the slats of her blinds, her fingers clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline, her eyes wide with a combination of exhaustion and unrelenting terror. The rapid visual pace and the escalating auditory cues underscore the accelerating timeline of the unfolding threat and the alarmingly narrowing window of safety for Alara. Her every waking moment became consumed by this pervasive fear. She became hyper-aware of every minor creak within the old structure of her house, every rustle of leaves outside her windows, every distant car passing on the street. Her senses were on an unceasing, high alert, creating an internal environment of constant, debilitating anxiety that left her perpetually on edge. The world beyond her immediate, shrinking perception felt increasingly hostile, as if the very air around her held a concealed, malevolent danger, pushing her to the very precipice of her ability to cope with such prolonged psychological pressure. This continuous and relentless escalation solidified the chilling understanding that a critical juncture was rapidly approaching, demanding immediate and decisive action from external forces, as her own increasingly desperate and isolated attempts to secure her safety proved tragically insufficient against an unseen, persistent, and malevolent threat that seemed to know her every move. The profound gravity of her situation was no longer a matter of mere apprehension, but stark, undeniable reality, requiring urgent, outside intervention to prevent a potential catastrophe from unfolding directly before her eyes. The simple act of contacting the police was her last, desperate gamble, a plea thrown into the void in hopes that someone could pull her back from the edge and abyss she felt herself slowly being dragged into. Her lifeline had been cast, and now the fragile hope rested on the speed and efficacy of the response, battling against an unseen enemy that was determined to close in. The desperate phone call Lara Vance made to the police ignited a chain of rapid, highly coordinated actions within the local law enforcement agency. The dispatcher, having recognized the genuine and escalating fear in Alara's voice, immediately flagged the incoming report as high priority. This wasn't merely a routine call about suspicious activity. It was categorized as a potential threat to life. Information began to flow with critical speed. Details gleaned from Alara's frantic account. The specific address on Maple Drive, the description of the dark-colored van, the disturbing phone call patterns, and the recent property markings were instantaneously relayed to patrol units operating within her sector. The urgency was absolute, a silent mandate for immediate response. Within moments of dispatch, the distinctive roar of powerful engines and the familiar flash of emergency lights signified that police were springing into action. Squad cars, their sirens now fully engaged, tore through the quiet suburban streets, their drivers pushing the vehicles to their limits while maintaining strict adherence to safety protocols. Dashcam footage from multiple cruisers, later reviewed, would show the blurred lines of the neighborhood, trees and streetlights streaking past as officers race against an unseen clock. The internal radio network crackled with crisp, urgent communications. Officers coordinated their approach, confirming routes, discussing potential point of entry, and strategizing their initial response upon arrival. They meticulously exchanged updates on their positions, navigating the intricate residential layout, their voices calm but firm, reflecting years of training under pressure. Visual aids, such as an overhead map graphic, briefly appeared, illustrating the police route with dynamic, moving indicators, highlighting proximity of the responding units to Alara's residence. Crucially, timestamps flashed on the screen, starkly reminding the listener of how agonizingly close the threat was to its grim realization, each second passing with a heavy, irreversible weight. The meticulous choreography of their response reflected a deep understanding that in situations like this, hesitation or miscommunication could have fatal consequences. Every turn, every acceleration, every radio transmission was a calculated move in a desperate, high-stakes game where the life of Alara Vance hung precariously in the balance. The knowledge that specific, immediate danger awaited them at the destination fueled their relentless pursuit, their focus absolute on preventing the worst-case scenario from unfolding. The intelligence gathered from Alara's call, combined with any available preliminary background checks on similar activities in the area, informed their tactical decisions. They considered the potential for the suspect to be armed, the possibility of a forced entry already being in progress, and the paramount need to secure Alara's safety above all else. As the lead patrol car closed in, its headlights illuminating the unassuming facade of Alara's house, the officers inside mentally prepared for any scenario. Their training kicked in, overriding instinct with practice procedure. They scanned the property for any signs of forced entry, any movement within the shadows, any indication that they were already too late. The air outside the vehicles was thick with a palpable tension, a stillness that preceded the storm. The final stretch of road seemed to narrow, the distance shrinking with agonizing slowness, even as their speed remained high. The rhythmic thumping of their own hearts blended with the urgent pulse of the sirens, creating an immersive soundscape of escalating anticipation. The radio chatter became even more focused, confirming final approach vectors and assigning specific roles for perimeter containment and primary entry. Each officer knew their precise responsibility in the synchronized effort to contain the threat and ensure the safety of the occupant within. The culmination of Alara's growing dread, her desperate call for help, and the rapid, precise mobilization of law enforcement was now reaching its critical apex. The entire operation was a race against the clock ticking down to zero, a race they were determined to win, where success would be measured simply in a life preserved and failure in an irreversible tragedy. The culmination of Alara Vance's deepening dread, her desperate plea for help, and the rapid, precise mobilization of law enforcement was now reaching its undeniable, critical apex. As the marked patrol cars and the less conspicuous tactical unit vehicles converged on Maple Drive, the officers inside were operating with a heightened sense of awareness, their training and instincts guiding every move. The final stretch of road seemed to narrow, the distance to Alara's house shrinking with agonizing slowness, even as their speed remained high. The rhythmic thumping of their own hearts blended with the urgent pulse of the sirens, creating an immersive soundscape of escalating anticipation. The radio chatter, which had been a constant hum of coordination, now became even more focused, confirming final approach vectors and assigning specific roles for perimeter containment and primary entry. Each officer knew their precise responsibility in the synchronized effort to contain the threat and ensure the safety of the occupant within. The knowledge that a specific, immediate danger awaited them at the destination fueled their relentless pursuit, their focus absolute on preventing the worst-case scenario from unfolding. As the first units rounded the final corner, illuminating Alara's unassuming home with their powerful headlights, a chilling scene began to unfold. The previously parked dark-colored van, which Alara had noted with such trepidation, was now positioned directly in her driveway, its engine running. A figure, later identified as the assailant, was observed near Alara's front door, actively engaged in trying to gain entry. The distinct sounds of forced entry, a jarring scraping followed by a muffled thud, carried faintly on the night air to the approaching officers. This was a precise climactic moment they had raced against time to intercept. There was no more waiting, no time for further observation. The assailant was closing in, their intent undeniably clear, their final act imminent. The officers, without hesitation, executed their training with split-second precision. Their vehicle screeched to a halt, and doors flew open simultaneously. A cacophony erupted. The shouted commands of the lead officer, the heavy thud of boots hitting pavement, and the rapid, adrenaline-pumping sound effects of police action. One team moved swiftly to secure the perimeter around the house, ensuring no escape routes for the assailant. Another, the designated entry team, moved directly toward the front door. Through quick, decisive action, one officer could be seen shattering a small window near the door, reaching in to unlock it from the inside, while another braced a breach. The element of surprise, combined with overwhelming force, was critical. Just as the assailant managed to force the door partially open, beginning to step inside, the police burst through. The scene unfolded in a tense, rapid reenactment, every movement amplified, every sound heightened. The sharp, decisive crack of a door being forced open, the heavy rush of multiple bodies entering confined space, the sudden shouts of police, "Get down!" filled the air. In a swift, fluid motion, officers moved to intervene, physically pulling Alara Vance, who was now visible just inside the doorway, back from a very precipice of threat, shielding her as they simultaneously moved to neutralize the assailant. The confrontation was swift and decisive. The assailant, caught completely off guard, was overwhelmed by the rapid and coordinated police response. Within moments, they were subdued and secured, the immediate danger effectively neutralized. The raw, desperate struggle against an unknown entity that consumed Alara for weeks finally ceased. For Alara, the transition from terror to an almost disbelieving salvation was instantaneous and profound. One moment she was facing an insurmountable threat. The next, the strong, reassuring presence of law enforcement was between her and the danger. The victory was achieved with breathtaking speed, literally within seconds of the assailant gaining entry. It was a narrow escape, a testament to timing, the dispatcher's quick assessment, and the incredible swiftness and coordination of the responding officers. The scene, which had minutes before been a crucible of fear and imminent violence, now transformed into a tableau of controlled recovery. The blaring sirens began to soften, then faded into a distant, almost melancholic hum, marking the shift from crisis to aftermath. Officers secured the assailant, ensuring there was no further threat, while others immediately turned their attention to Alara, offering reassurance and beginning the process of securing the scene and collecting initial statements. A collective sigh of relief, though unspoken, seemed to permeate the air. The chilling possibility of what if a murder was stopped at the last second had found its answer, and for Alara Vance, it meant the invaluable gift of a continued life. The pervasive fear that had defined her existence for days, then weeks, was suddenly, powerfully lifted, replaced by an overwhelming, almost disorienting wave of profound gratitude and an acute awareness of just how close she had come to an irreversible fate. With the immediate and terrifying danger now contained, the frantic adrenaline of the intervention began to subside, giving way to methodical and meticulous process of the aftermath. The piercing crescendo of sirens softened, then gradually faded into a distant, almost melancholic hum, signaling the shift from crisis to controlled recovery. Officers, their faces still etched with the intensity of the confrontation, moved with practiced efficiency to secure the assailant. They ensured the individual was thoroughly subdued and restrained, eliminating any lingering threat, and began the procedures for their apprehension and transport. For Alara Vance, the transition from terror to an almost disbelieving salvation was both instantaneous and profoundly overwhelming. One moment she was staring directly into the abyss of an insurmountable threat, feeling utterly helpless. The next, the strong, reassuring presence of law enforcement was physically between her and the danger, pulling her back from precipice. The raw, desperate struggle against an unknown entity that consumed her for weeks, eroding her peace of mind and sense of safety, finally ceased. The victory was achieved with breathtaking speed, literally within seconds of the assailant managing to force entry into her home. It was a narrow escape, a testament to incredibly precise timing, the dispatcher's astute initial assessment, and the unparalleled swiftness and coordination of the responding officers. The scene, which minutes before had been a crucible of fear and imminent violence, transformed into a tableau of controlled recovery and systematic action. A collective sigh of relief, though unspoken among the professionals, seemed to permeate the air, a silent acknowledgement of a life preserved. The chilling hypothetical, what if a murder was stopped at the last second, had found its powerful real-life answer, and for Alara Vance, it meant the invaluable gift of continued, uninterrupted life. The pervasive fear that had defined her existence for days, then weeks, was suddenly, powerfully lifted, replaced by an overwhelming, almost disorienting wave of profound gratitude and an acute awareness of just how infinitesimally close she had come to an irreversible and catastrophic fate. Immediately following the stabilization of the scene, the focus shifted to the intricate process of investigation and context. The objective was to piece together precisely how police had identified and tracked the suspect with such crucial precision, enabling their last-second intervention. The foundation of this success lay significantly in Alera's courage to make that initial, desperate call, providing the vital first alert that something was profoundly wrong. From that critical starting point, a comprehensive network of investigative tools and techniques was activated. Detectives quickly initiated the process of obtaining phone pings, meticulously tracing the digital breadcrumbs of the assailant's mobile device to establish their movements and patterns of presence near Alera's residence. They scoured CCTV footage from nearby businesses and residential cameras, sifting through hours of recordings to identify the dark-colored van Alera described, to pinpoint the assailant's physical appearance, and corroborate the timeline of their surveillance activities. Crucial witness tips, some perhaps initially dismissed by the tipsters as insignificant, were systematically collected and cross-referenced. A neighbor recalling seeing the same van lingering on the street multiple times, a delivery driver remembering a suspicious individual loitering, or even a casual observation from a dog walker. Each piece of information, no matter how small, contributed to the larger mosaic of the case. The police investigation wasn't just about reacting to a crime. It was about connecting these disparate pieces of information, building a comprehensive profile of the assailant's intent and methods. Officers involved in the post-intervention debriefings and subsequent investigative phases often shared a common sentiment. "We got the call in time. That was the difference." This simple phrase underscored the critical importance of early reporting and the public's trust in law enforcement to act upon their concerns. The collaborative effort between patrol officers, dispatchers, detectives, and forensic specialists was paramount. Forensic teams meticulously processed the scene, collecting any potential evidence left behind by the assailant during their attempted entry. Fibers, fingerprints, tool marks, all contributing to building an irrefutable case. The culmination of this tireless work allowed investigators to reconstruct the assailant's activities, understanding their planning, their stakeouts, and their ultimate intent, painting a clear picture of the premeditated nature of their actions. The events surrounding Alera Vance's narrow escape serve as a powerful closing reflection, offering crucial lessons for communities everywhere. They highlight with stark clarity the invaluable impact of early reporting, the swiftness of Alera's call, spurred by her persistent intuition, and the accumulating signs of danger, provided law enforcement with the essential window of opportunity they needed to mobilize and intervene. This case powerfully underscores the profound importance of trust in law enforcement. When individuals feel confident that their concerns, even those initially vague, will be taken seriously and acted upon with professionalism and urgency, they are far more likely to come forward with vital information. This symbiotic relationship between the community and its police force forms the very cornerstone of effective crime prevention. Furthermore, these scenarios serve as potent reminders of the enduring need for personal awareness and vigilance in daily life. Being attuned to one's surroundings, recognizing unusual patterns or behaviors, and trusting one's own instincts when something feels wrong are crucial first lines of defense. This means paying attention to details, whether the car that seemed to follow you, an unfamiliar person lurking nearby, or unsettling phone calls or messages that disrupt your peace. The final message is clear and empowering. You can make the difference. Report suspicious behavior. Every call, every tip, every piece of information shared with authorities contributes directly to the collective safety of the community. It reinforces the idea that preventing crime is a shared responsibility, a collaborative effort between vigilant citizens and dedicated law enforcement, working in concert to identify and neutralize threats before they can devastate lives. The story of Alera Vance stands as a testament to this collaborative power, a vivid example of how proactive vigilance, timely reporting, and swift police action can avert tragedy, preserving life and reinforcing the safety and security of our communities against unseen dangers.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more.